Hello and welcome to Public Affairs Now, our super local look at what's going on in the Maryland General Assembly and the Arundel County Council. I'm Dave Abrams. Today joining us on the show we have Len Lazarick from MarylandReporter.com. Len, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
And our Speaker of the House and Delegate from District 30, Michael Busch.
Dave, good to be here.
Appreciate you being here. Let's talk a little bit. We're about halfway through the session. And this is where things start getting a little exciting. So, Len, give us an idea of sort of what happens during this phase of the General Assembly session for the month of February, the rest of February.
Well, what happens is everybody gets really serious. Not that they weren't serious beforehand, but the committees the bills have been introduced, the committee process has been working, bills are coming to the floor, and this is the time when they actually start passing legislation. The first couple of weeks it's largely ceremonial, lots of guests being introduced, not that doesn't happen, but now the sessions are going to get longer and the speaker can tell you a lot more about what's going to happen.
So some of the real work gets done now. And Mr. Speaker, would you say this is kind of the opportunity for folks to come down to Annapolis and testify on bills and talk to the committees?
Absolutely. Look, I mean, there's over 1,500 bills that are in the General Assembly right now, in the House of Delegates. And they will be scheduled, and the general public gets to come down and testify for or against proposals the legislators put forward. So you'll see quite a few hearings go late into the night, some pretty emotional issues, and they start to take place now, and it's a pretty significant workload.
So, Mr. Speaker, last week we had Delegate Herb McMillan from your district on, and he talked a little bit about the governor's budget. And out of fairness, we want to get your side of the story as well. What was your reaction?
Well, I think the governor put in a pretty conservative budget. I think a couple of things that were left out, such as the demolition money for Baltimore City for the restructuring of the blighted houses that she promised to put in. He did not put in the budget. He put into a supplemental. When you have $450 million in reserve, there's no reason why that shouldn't have been in the original budget. He also did not fully fund the Prince George's County Hospital. Prince George's County has made a commitment to put up $208 million. The governor was supposed to put $45 million in this year, and he only put $27 in, and he did not put the $15 million in for the operating expense. So I think there were a few things that particularly members of the Democratic caucus, particularly members of the African American community and the Black caucus felt that they were shortchanged. In the capital budget, there's no money for Morgan State, which was set to go forward this year, $4.5 million, no money for UMBC. There was no money for Coppin State University. So I think there were some things that were left out of the capital budget and the operating budget. Since that time, the legislature's taken action, and the governor sent down 2 supplemental budgets that reflect that the action of the General Assembly has had some effect on the administration's reaction to the short funding of areas in Prince George's and Baltimore City.
Does it seem like those are issues that could be worked out, that there could be a compromise?
Well, look, I think that the fact of the matter is that when the General Assembly came in and they overrode 6 of the governor's veto, showed that they had the ability to muster 85 votes in the House and 29 in the Senate to override suggestions made by the governor. And the fact of the matter that when he left out the Prince George's County funding and the Baltimore City funding, he knows that when the legislature starts moving legislation that would fully fund those, that he either has to sign them into law during the period we're in the 90-day session, or he has to face an override from the General Assembly, both the House and the Senate. So I think that has been an impetus for the governor to put in supplemental budgets that affect both Prince George's and Baltimore City.
And we're going to get back to those veto override votes in just a minute. But Len, let's turn to you for a second. There are 2 issues that, to a lot of people probably were not expected to come boil up to the top, and that I saw were covered in the last week. And one was voting rights, and 2 was right to die, so to speak. Could you tell us about those issues and sort of where they stand right now?
Well, the Death with Dignity bill, and frankly, they've renamed it, and I can't remember what the name is, but they've been working on that actually for a couple of years, but it was first introduced last year. They've made some modifications. I think it remains controversial. And I think you ought to talk to the speaker about the voting rights. On the voting rights bill, because that is really the legislative leadership's proposal, and he can talk more about that. We really haven't. That bill hasn't had a hearing yet, and that was a proposal from both the speaker and the Senate president, and I think he can better talk about that.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask you that, Mr. Speaker, because apparently you are on record as supporting this right to die legislation now.
Yes.
And does that change its prospects in the House this year?
Look, I think it's something each individual is going to make their own decision on, but it's an end-of-life option, really, what it comes down to.
It allows you to take a medication if you have a terminal disease, to take a terminal medication.
And there's guidelines in place in states that have passed this legislation that restrict it to certain areas where a terminal illness is set to take place. Last year we lost Dick Israel from Annapolis City, who was a close friend of mine.
That's right.
Had Parkinson's disease. He was an impetus much of my decision-making process on right to die legislation, as well as my former basketball coach and mayor of Annapolis, Pip Moyer. But from my standpoint, it's an option. No one is saying that you are mandated to take that option, but people should have that end-of-life option if they feel that that is the best direction for them, for their quality of life, and for the family members that are around them. I don't think people are going to make that unilaterally without some kind of input from their family members as well.
Sure.
So it's an option. It's not a mandated process.
And then let's talk about the veto override for the voting bill for folks who are felons when they get out of prison. And I believe that there were also some specifications that you can vote if you're on parole or in a work release. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that there's overwhelming evidence out there that when people are paroled and they're paroled by a parole board that wants to mainstream them back into society, the more functions that take place in a normal lifestyle keeps the recidivism rate down. And states that have enacted this, recidivism rates have gone down and not up. So I think when an individual who is on parole, meets all the qualifications of being on parole, should have the right to exercise the franchise of voting.
And what was the disagreement with the governor there?
Well, we're not exactly sure what the disagreement with the governor, because he didn't send down any real message of why he disagreed with it. But the fact of the matter is, if you break parole, you go back to prison, and all your rights are taken away from you.
Right.
But while you're out on parole, and let me say this, again, people make a decision that Dave Abrams or Len Lazarick should go out on parole after committing a felony to be mainstreamed back into life, then
is that true?
They should have all the voting rights.
Len has no comment.
I think it's Abrams that's on probation.
Okay. This is devolving quickly.
Right. So we can talk about a couple of the other veto overrides with the what they call the Hotel and Marriott bill, when the full Chamber of Commerce supported this, and
the governor didn't want another fee.
Well, it has nothing to do with the fee. There's no fee that goes passed on to any individual in the state. But the people who invest in bricks and mortar, like the Marriott the Marriott hotel chain, all the hotel chains in the state of Maryland, the hospitality industry, the chambers of commerce, felt that the governor was wrong in vetoing that bill, supported the legislature in overriding that veto. So there were 6 vetoes, many of them that individuals believe strongly in, particularly the fact that the line item 1 capital project and which was clearly overridden and supported by my good friend Herb McMillan in the veto override.
Well, and I understand also that you and the Senate President received quite a lot of communication from voters about the felony voting bill. Could you describe your reaction to that? And did you get a lot of emails and calls? Or
look, I mean, you know, I'm in a position where I get a lot of emails and calls for the entire time I've been in the legislature. It doesn't mean the decision that we made was wrong. And the fact of the matter is, I think it's been misrepresented by the administration. I think the President of the Senate feels the same way it's been misrepresented by the administration. But that's part of politics. And I think that, you know, we did the right thing, and I think time will prove us out to be correct.
Well, this week is what we call the green bag appointments, where the governor sends down all the names of the people he wants to be running hundreds of boards and commissions, I think is a fair statement in the state. Len, tell us a little bit about how that works and why that's a big deal here in Annapolis, even though, you know, folks may not follow it very closely on the outside.
Well, actually, I don't think it winds up being a big deal when you have a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature. But as a matter of fact, Governor Hogan's appointees have not really run into serious problems with the legislature, except for one involving higher education, some questions about other people. But these are largely nonpartisan positions. I mean, it's really surprising when you actually look at the list, the number of boards and commissions that people serve on. And I think, as a matter of fact, any governor often has a hard time filling some of these positions because most of them
they're volunteers. Most
of them are unpaid, right. and some of them get to make important decisions. So, you know, unless the governor chooses to pick out people that are sort of lightning rods for criticism, in general, the legislature is going to go along.
What do you think, Mr. Speaker?
I think Glenn Lazarick is correct in many respects. But I think it's unfortunate that Governor Hogan is the first governor since desegregation that has not appointed an African American to the Anne Arundel County School Board. I mean, you had a qualified individual in Solon Webb who was put up for reappointment that served with distinction, and he managed to circumvent Mr. Webb and appoint two individuals to the Board of Education, leaving the Anne Arundel County Board of Education without an African American representative since the desegregation of schools. When there's 20% of your student body enrolled in your public school system that are African American, and all the hurdles they've had to overcome to get a quality education. I mean, there's a statue on the back of the State House of Thurgood Marshall, who argued at Brown versus the Board of Education. Not since before McKeldin. And McKeldin and Ehrlich and Agnew all had African Americans on the school board.
Well, the governor's not here to defend himself, but let's move on to...
Well, I'm not going to defend the governor, sure. but I think it does bring up the issue that Anne Arundel County is now in the distinct minority in not having any members of the school board elected. Not that solves your diversity issue that you're bringing up, but 17 of 24 counties now have fully elected school boards, and some have a hybrid. And if you have an elected school board, then you don't have, you have a different kind of politics going on. These are all nonpartisan offices, but you don't have the governors involved anymore. So, you know,
it does appear that this whole situation with the school board has a lot of moving parts to it, that it's difficult to boil it down to one reason why something is one way or the other. But Mr. Speaker, I believe that you do have some changes you want to make to how the school board is configured with representation on the nominating commission, correct?
First of all, I think that you have to have community representatives out there on the nominating commission. And I think you have to have some sensitivity from the administration to the school process in Anne Arundel County. Now, Len brings up the fact that there's elected school boards, and then one of the contentions is,
and there's been bills year after year in Anne Arundel
right.
County to make it
Well,
elected.
can you tell me how many African Americans have been elected in the legislative districts in Anne Arundel County since 1960?
I do not know the answer to that.
2.
Harris T. Allen?
And Jocelyn Pena-Melnick.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, obviously, the school board process is going to be a very controversial subject
100%.
From time immemorial. Let's talk about another controversial subject, which is gun control. And Len, we had a press conference with Democratic members of the legislature to announce some legislation they have. Tell us a little bit about what some of those bills do.
Well, as a matter of fact, in the overall context of gun control, these are relatively small bills, among them not allowing guns on college campuses. But I think the overall issue that we need to bring up with gun control is that the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, Federal District Court, sent the Firearms Safety Act, which the legislature passed several years ago, back to the district court judge. However, the significance of that was that it was a very small portion of the Firearms Safety Act that they overturned. As a matter of fact, the substantive provisions about training and licensing and fingerprinting have been upheld in the process. So I would say that the speaker can describe some of the issues that they want to take care of, but the major substantive portion, Maryland now has some of the strictest gun control laws in the nation, and the federal courts have upheld them.
And real quick, let's go over some of the specifics, because there's college campuses and terrorist watch lists, I believe.
Look, I think they're basically common sense issues. If you're on the terrorist watch list, you don't get a permit to buy a gun. I don't know how anybody can disagree with that, regardless of what political affiliation they're in. The other is in codifying what the judicial system should do right now, is that if you're convicted of assault, the judge has to tell you you have to turn your guns in a 48-hour period of time. Currently, they're supposed to do that, but the judges are not. So we're just codifying the fact that judges have to announce when you're convicted of assault and battery, particularly spousal assault, that you have to turn your guns in. I don't know what is controversial about that. And all you're doing is codifying the fact that there shouldn't be guns on college campuses. That should be a sanctuary, as President Miller stated. Kids should feel safe there. We've had too many tragedies on college campuses with guns. And, so I think that there are 3 common sense proposals that I think will get an overwhelming majority vote, and I think the governor should sign in the law.
Well, we'll find out what the governor, how the governor feels about those bills. Every episode of this show, we like to talk politics a little bit. So I'm going to ask you for the last question, Len. The filing
we weren't
deadline.
Talking about politics.
No, well, horse race stuff.
Okay.
The filing deadline for the U.S. Senate passed just a week ago, and so we have our field set for those who want to succeed Barbara Mikulski. What's going on in that race? I mean, I haven't seen a whole lot of publicity and things going on there. What's the status?
Well, you have a major primary in both parties. On the Democratic side, as everybody suspected, Representative Elijah Cummings did not get into the race. He was kind of dangling that possibility for a long time. So while you have a large number of candidates, I don't know whether it's a dozen or so, it really comes down to Donna Edwards and Chris Van Hollen, 2 members of Congress from the 4th and 8th districts. On the Republican side, you have a more open race with 4 or 5 credible candidates. The House Minority Whip, who sits in the front of the chamber here, Kathy Szeliga is one of them, Rich Douglas, Chris Kafalis, Dave Wallace, and in any case,
A lot.
my memory,
Candidates.
a lot of candidates. That will be more contentious. They're having their first debate this week. I don't think Edwards and Van Hollen have had a debate yet. They've had joint forums, but primaries on April 26. Early voting starts 10 days before that, and there'll be a lot of choices, including
The minute the session's over, Mr. Speaker.
including Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton.
So
And,
people will come out probably for this.
one would think.
Yeah.
One
So
would think.
so does that put you in a difficult spot as one of the Democratic leaders? Have you made an endorsement in this race?
I have not made an endorsement. I think it's best that I stay out of the endorsement process, quite candidly. I have to oversee 141 members of the General Assembly here. And my job is to focus on what takes place in Annapolis. Elections will take care of themselves. Obviously, when people get through the primary, I will support the Democratic candidates.
But no disagreement that this is a big seat that doesn't come up very often.
Look, I mean, Senator McCoskey leaves a giant shadow. I mean, she is unparalleled in her achievements in the U.S. Senate, the longest-serving woman ever, first chair of appropriations as a woman, and the fact that she has represented the state of Maryland with distinction all these years. It's no doubt whoever takes her place will have big shoes to fill.
Well, thank you very much. Again, we have a very quick sprint going now to the very end of the General Assembly session. I want to thank our guests, House Speaker Mike Busch. Thank you for being on the program.
Thank you.
And Len Lazarick from MarylandReporter.com.
Good to be here.
Please be sure to follow Len on Facebook, and we will see you next time.